Tonight, the political moves behind a new policy on temporary foreign workers. Changing the rules and reining in the numbers to curb a historic surge.
A significant number of applications to bring workers here for jobs that Canadians could do. We need to change course.
The immigration clampdown as the Liberals signal substantial change is on the way. The huge tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, hoping to steer Canada's auto industry in the right direction.
We're acting to protect our workers, to protect our industry.
Plus, bank customers beware how to protect yourself from fraudsters putting a new spin on an old scam. Also, a curveball for a former Blue Jay playing for two teams in the same game.
I'll tell you what, I was surprised when I found out I was the first one to do it.
And when Three's Company inspires a crowd.
A lot of people driving past us with their windows down and their phones up so that they could record us. It was a spectacle for sure.
The quirky sitcom character roping in visitors to a Newfoundland town.
Live your best life, just be free.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Heather Butts.
Good evening. Looking to make moves on some pressing issues this fall, the federal Liberals appear to be heading into a season of change. The Trudeau government is now implementing stricter rules when it comes to temporary foreign workers after a historic surge in recent years. Also signaling at a cabinet retreat, more changes to immigration are in the works. CTV's Judy Trin starts us off.
Recently arrived passenger.
Canada will accept nearly 500,000 new permanent residents this year, but the Prime Minister and his cabinet are signaling those levels could be lowered.
Now it's time to take a look at them and put real options on the table for the Prime Minister and for other cabinet ministers to look at, and not cosmetic changes.
But for now, facing pressure on housing and social services, the Liberal government is tightening restrictions on temporary residents.
Hola, ¿cómo está? Bienvenido.
During the pandemic, many businesses hired foreign workers to deal with labor shortages. By the end of September, permits will be denied in regions with a jobless rate of 6%.
We have a softer job market with a rising unemployment rate, and simply put, not as many businesses finding it difficult to find workers.
While the farming, construction, and healthcare sectors won't be impacted, it will be tougher for hotels and restaurants to find workers.
We have found resort properties, for example, or areas in remote parts of Canada have more trouble attracting workers and domestic workers, so they rely on this program.
This policy change is expected to leave 65,000 foreign workers in limbo.
There are tens of thousands of workers who will be facing potential deportations. What steps are they going to do to make sure that does not happen? We're in a process, not only in Canada, but across the global north, where we're vilifying and criminalizing migrants.
The post-COVID surge in temporary residents has more than doubled to nearly 2.8 million people in 3 years. That explosive growth includes over 1 million international students and more than 280,000 Ukrainians fleeing war.
There's a lot of people in Canada now as students, workers, refugee claimants. There's backlogs of in all the programs that are unacceptable, including citizenship applications.
The Trudeau government expects unemployed youth and new immigrants to take on the entry-level jobs left vacant by foreign workers. Already, the government has reduced the number of international students by 35%, and more changes to immigration policy are expected in the fall. Heather.
All right, Judy, thanks. Also announced at that gathering of the Inner Circle, a plan to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, along with 25% on steel and aluminum from that country. And late tonight, a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy expressed strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition, adding it will damage trade and economic cooperation between China and Canada. CTV's Mike LeCouture on the significant escalation of trade tensions.
Chinese EVs aren't even available in this country, but the government says they are a threat to Canada's automotive industry.
We will be introducing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum.
The move mirrors the United States. Canada has accused China of a state-directed policy to flood the market with cheap materials and cheap cars designed to kill Canadian industries.
We simply will not allow that to happen to our EV sector, which is showing such promise and in which we have invested so effectively.
Chinese-made BYD cars retail for about $25,000, an appealing price point for consumers as Canada attempts to meet its self-imposed 2035 mandate where all new vehicles sold must be zero-emission. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association applauds applying the tariffs, but has concerns about that environmental goal.
We should give Canadians the time to have confidence to make the switch, and we will see mass adoption, but a federal sales mandate never was the right approach, and it will continue to be a problem towards 2035.
The government believes the target is attainable even without Chinese cars. The more immediate concern for some is China starting an all-out trade war targeting Canadian exports.
I think they'll go everywhere we've seen them go before. I think you can see beef, pork, grains, that kind of thing on the East Coast, lobster.
China could also respond by cutting off the sale of critical minerals that Canada needs for our EV supply chain. And Heather, that could make things more expensive for Canadians.
Mike, thanks. For more, we'll turn to CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelos, in Halifax. These are some big-ticket items on the table at this retreat, Vashi. What are they hoping this accomplishes for them politically?
Well, I think, Heather, what they're trying to do by putting these more substantive announcements on the table at the start of the cabinet retreat is really counter the narrative that they weren't doing that. They're very hopeful that the stuff they do ultimately and eventually resonates with Canadians, that they think that this government is doing stuff that makes their life better, that addresses the sort of tension points in their life. But they're up against a lot, right? And we've spoken about this before. They are trailing badly in the polls versus the Conservatives, and they have been for a very long time. They're also pinning a lot on the notion of hope, right? Yes, this stuff is significant, but it takes a lot of time to put into place, and therefore the impact both politically and from a policy perspective will take a while too.
And Vashi, a much different tone today on immigration. The Prime Minister really opened the door for more significant change.
Yeah, to me, Heather, this is the big headline right now out of this cabinet retreat. That the fact that after months, if not years, of pushing back even against the question of reducing permanent immigration levels, they are now, and the Prime Minister himself, as you heard Judy tell us, specifically saying they're leaving the door open to the possibility of that happening. This isn't just a seismic policy move. Politically, what it says to me is that they recognize it is a big vulnerability. The issue of immigration and the lack of absorptive capacity in society has proven to them to be a political vulnerability, and they are now coming to a point where they're ready to do something about it. The question, of course, is when. It sounds like it could come sooner rather than later, and it will have big knock-on effects. It won't just be something that impacts healthcare or the job market. It will impact the economy as a whole. Think about this for a second. In the last year, 97% of immigration, or of population growth rather, has been driven by immigration. Heather?
Vashi Kapelos in Halifax. Where Canada's railway dispute was also top of mind, the minister in charge of the file again defending his decision to impose binding arbitration. CTV's Scott Hurst is following the story for us. Scott, the matter is far from over.
Heather, the trains might be rolling again, but the union is vowing to keep up the fight, saying it will appeal the decision in court and continue to keep up the pressure on the federal government. The Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered CN Rail and Canadian Pacific Kansas City to end the work stoppage that was sparked by Thursday's lockout of more than 9,000 unionized workers. It had a significant impact on Canada's supply chain, shutting down freight traffic right across the country and some select commuter lines in the Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver areas. The decision now imposes binding arbitration on all parties involved. The union representing the workers says it's not happy with the back-to-work ruling, arguing it sets a dangerous precedent, but will abide by it. The federal government, on the other hand, says it stepped in when too many jobs and too many livelihoods were at stake.
It's a bit of a balance to be struck, and so we all know that from a constitutional perspective, freedom of association says the right to collective bargaining and the right to strike are things that are protected, but they're protected in a balance.
The return to service comes as a huge sigh of relief for businesses across Canada, especially farmers and other industries that rely on the expansive rail network. But it could still take days, if not weeks, for rail traffic to get back to normal, meaning some companies and industries could continue to feel the financial impact of the work stoppage, Heather.
Scott, thank you. Getting stuck on excruciating commutes is a common theme for Canadians these days. Here's CTV's Colton Prale on traffic troubles, now back to pre-pandemic levels.
Gone are the days of empty streets and open highways throughout the pandemic. The traffic is back, and it's as bad as ever. After dropping during the rush to remote work, commute times across Canada have returned to their pre-pandemic norms, an extra 2.5 minutes of driving on average. The change driven by more drivers heading into the office. Now, more than 1 million hybrid employees make at least one trip into work a week, and commuters say they're noticing the difference.
It always seems like it's packed. And it's the same, like in the morning and then evening when you go back, it's the same.
I have to wake up at around 5 a.m. to get to work, and I have to get to work at 8. So that's an insane commute.
In Toronto and the Golden Horseshoe, commutes are the longest in the country, with Vancouver and Montreal not far behind. The longest on average take at least 30 minutes. But take public transit and it's an extra 15 minutes each way. Experts say it's why, even as workers return in force, transit numbers are lagging behind their pre-pandemic norms, with just 1 in 10 commuters opting for the train or the bus.
We really, in some ways, have a little bit of a branding issue that we have to overcome here. We need to ensure that transit is a great option and the best option in Canadian cities. And, you know, it hasn't been coming out of the pandemic.
One stat to watch, the number of commuters taking at least an hour to and from work each day. It's jumped 3 years in a row, in large part thanks to long drives in the Golden Horseshoe. Colton Prale, CTV News, Ottawa.
Around 1 million customers of Park and Fly are being warned their personal information may have been compromised during a massive data breach. The company, which operates in 7 Canadian cities, says hackers accessed details like names, email, and mailing addresses, but the company insists no payment information was compromised. Learning your bank account has been compromised is a terrifying ordeal, especially when you've been duped into thinking it's true. A warning tonight, it's part of a new scam involving e-transfers. CTV's Alison Bamford on what happens and how to avoid it.
A new twist on a scam that's duped people for years. This version of the so-called bank investigator scam starts with a phone call.
Hello.
From fraudsters impersonating financial institutions, claiming the victim's bank account was compromised.
They try to instill a false sense of urgency to try to make you take an action without thinking it through.
Scammers convince the victim to send an Interac e-transfer to their personal cell number to protect their funds. The suspect provides the security question and answer for the e-transfer, then asks the victim to send them a code, which is the last few digits of the e-transfer URL.
By providing that code, criminals are able to, retrieve that e-transfer because they have the question and password for the e-transfer along with the full URL, and they deposit the funds into the fraudulent bank account.
Technology and AI making these scams more sophisticated. And unlike the grandparent scam that targets seniors, people of all ages are falling victim to this one.
This is a scam for everybody because everybody now is using online banking.
If you receive a suspicious call, tech experts say it's best to hang up and call the number on the back of your bank card, but wait 10 minutes or use a different phone to make sure the scammer isn't on the other line.
The telephone system has changed. When I was a child, when you hung up on the phone call, you hung up on the phone call. Now, because of voice over IP, there might well be a delay.
There are other ways to clue into scams. Banks won't ask people to transfer funds to an external account, and experts recommend never giving out your links or codes sent from texts or emails to anyone. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
Coming up, water restrictions return to Calgary.
We know these changes will impact daily routines, especially for businesses.
The call to conserve water as the city faces another repair. Plus, not your average pub crawl in Newfoundland. A landslide in southern Alaska has left one person dead and 3 others injured. The slide hit in the popular tourist destination of Ketchikan yesterday afternoon. A giant swath of forest gone, leaving a muddy streak and parts of the town buried. Now under a state of emergency, some people have been ordered to evacuate as officials warn another slide could happen. The tragedy struck following an unusually dry August, then a weekend storm drenched the area. Calgary's most critical water main has shut down again, forcing people to conserve their usage to allow for urgent repairs. Here's CTV's Rachel Crow spreading wings on communities enduring another round of restrictions.
A frustrating situation has cropped up again, with communities in Calgary dealing with similar restrictions from a water main break nearly 3 months ago.
At 12:01 this morning, we moved into stage 4 outdoor water restrictions.
That means no using water outdoors, and people and business owners asked to reduce water use by 25%.
We know these changes will impact daily routines, especially for businesses.
For people like Jason Dyler, the tighter restrictions, another blow.
A lot of sod usually goes out, but unfortunately not now, not with the water restrictions. So we're seeing a catastrophic loss of revenue.
To avoid loss of revenue, others trying to pivot.
During the first water restrictions, we had to truck in 100% of the water coming from Aldersyde, which is a big expense for us. Now this time what we're doing, we're hauling the water the same thing, but we're actually only doing it for 25% of the time as per the city guidelines.
The decision to bring back stricter water restrictions comes after numerous sites on the repaired line needed fixing. Calgary, not the only city dealing with pipeline problems. Last week, a massive water main break in Montreal flooded streets and basements, impacting thousands and prompted a boil water advisory.
The ones specifically that broke, they were of the same material in both cities, pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe. And unfortunately, there was a change in the standards in the late 70s, early 80s, which led to some pipes of this material being manufactured that are less robust and that have experienced some premature breaks.
Experts warning about aging infrastructure across the country. A StatsCan report from 2020 shows close to 1/5 of water, sewer, and stormwater pipes were reaching the end of their useful life. Rachel Crow, Spreading Wings, CTV News, Calgary.
Still ahead, talk about playing the field. A former Toronto Blue Jay makes history playing for 2 teams in the same game. A baseball first played out today when the Toronto Blue Jays beat the Boston Red Sox 4-1. But former Blue Jay Danny Jansen made history when he played for 2 teams in the same game. CTV's Christina Tenalia helps us understand this switcheroo.
It's a Major League Baseball first, and as I explain the details of this, let me add this gives a whole new meaning to the term inside baseball. Danny Jansen is a catcher, and on June the 26th, he was a catcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. That day, the Jays were playing the Boston Red Sox at Fenway Park. Jansen was up at bat, but there was a rain delay, and the game was rescheduled, halted, to be continued. 1 month later, on July the 27th, Danny Jansen was traded to, coincidentally, the Boston Red Sox. And 1 month after that, which brings us to today, that rain-delayed game continued at Fenway Park, technically right where it left off. Except now, today, Jansen is a catcher for the Red Sox. So because today's game is a continuation of the June 26th rain-delayed game, it is considered the same game, meaning Jansen made history, becoming the first player ever to play for 2 teams in the same game. Here's what Jansen had to say post-game.
I guess it hasn't fully hit me yet. I don't know. I'll tell you what, I was surprised when I found out I was the first one to do it a little bit. So it's cool. It's leaving a stamp like that on the game. It's interesting and it's strange, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And this oddity is within the MLB rules, which state the completion of a suspended game eventually continues as if it were the original game. Christina Tenalia, CTV News, Toronto.
There are no rules for this next feat. A Moncton man on a quest to find the best lobster rolls in New Brunswick, eating at 40 restaurants in 60 days.
Definitely need a bib for this one. My wife suggested we should stress before we eat this lobster roll.
The cook, business owner, and now social media star challenged himself to a lobster claw crawl, sampling seafood from across southern New Brunswick and sharing it all online.
I really wanted to pay homage to some of these local businesses out here and kind of show people the amazing hidden gems like we're at today.
He's created a top 10 list for lobster rolls and fried clams. The foodie says he's planning another taste test for next summer. Looks delicious. After the break, Three's Company, but check out this crowd, donning the comedic character's signature for a night on the town. Fans of the classic 70s sitcom Three's Company came decked out in permed wigs, saluting the wisecracking character Helen Roper. Pubs in Newfoundland encouraged lookalikes to come and knock on their door for a celebratory cheers. Here's CTV's Garrett Barry.
The colorful caftans, the curly red hair, turning some heads in the little town of Twillingate.
A lot of people driving past us with their windows down and their phones up so that they could record us as we were going by. It was fun. It was a spectacle for sure.
More than 100 people came out for a Saturday pub crawl. Tickets sold out in mere minutes. For a chance to let your hair down and get your wig on.
She's a reminder that it's never too late to be fun, be bold, and celebrate life's quirks. It's important to just live your best life, go out, not worry about being judged, just be free.
Helen Roper, the 70s and 80s sitcom character from Three's Company, is witty, flamboyant, unapologetically feminine. And these days, she's a bit of a cult classic. It started with a group of 50 in New Orleans a decade ago, and now these Roper romps are catching on across the continent.
Mrs. Roper as a character was so loud herself in her fashion choices and her hairstyle and all of that. You can pretty much take it in whatever direction you want.
Organizers here say more crawls and parades are planned in many Newfoundland towns. It's a chance to kick back, unwind for a day.
She said, I didn't realize how bad I needed to be with a group of women who let their hair down and just didn't care. That everybody just went with the flow. So to me, it was a great mental health day.
It's getting so popular that organizers in Twillingate are now wondering how they're going to accommodate next year's demand and whether they might need to rent out the town stadium to fit all the Helen Ropers romping around. Barry, CTV News, St. John's.
Looks like a good time. That is our newscast for this Monday night. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night.